طريقة سادة آل بعلوي العلامة الحبيب زين إبراهيم بن سميت نفعنا الله به وبعلومكم في الدارين آمين. ورضي الله عنكم إلى أن قال وقال رضي الله عنه إن السلف لا ينظرون في كتب التوحيد المشتملة على المباحث الدقيقة والمسائل الكلامية. قال سيدنا الشيخ عبد الله بن الأيدروس هذا مثل أن يقول أحدكم في معرض المدح فلان ليس بحائك وليس بحجام وهكذا، وذلك ذم لا مدح. وسيدنا الحبيب عبد الله بن علوي الحداد يقول إن قراءة السنوسية أو أم البحرين حرام. وقال نفع الله به السلف لا يميلون إلى
السنوسية
أو أم البحرين حرام. أم البراهين حرام. وقال نفع الله به السلف لا يميلون إلى التوغل في علوم التوحيد ولا في علوم الأدب الذي تجذب الإنسان وتخرجه عن دائرة الاعتدال. ومن زادت فصاحته زادت قباحته، وليس أن يترك الإنسان لسانه عوجاء ولكن هو التوغل الجم. وقال رضي الله عنه إن الشيخ ابن تيمية له مذهب ثان وقد نقم عليه السلف لبعض مسائل انفرد بترجيحها وأفتى بما لم يفت به السلف، وربما شدد بعض أهل العلم في ذلك، ومن اطلع على كتبه بان له الخطأ والصواب وحمل الأشياء على ظاهرها. وقد نبه الشيخ ابن حجر وغيره على شيء من ذلك وحذر الجهال من مطالعة كتبه انتهى. وقال سيدنا الإمام أيدروس بن عمر الحبشي نفع الله به إن سلفنا كانوا لا يحبون الاشتغال الكثير بالبحث في علم العقائد، ويقول إن كثرة التطلع على مسائل ذلك الفن يخشى منها إثارة الشكوك واطلاع على المسائل والعقائد الزائغة، ومثل ذلك البعد عنه أولى. ويكفي الإنسان من هذا العلم ما حوته عقيدة الغزالي رحمه الله ونحوها من العقائد المختصرة الوجيزة انتهى.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. We are still busy reading the chapter of certain books that the author of this book he recommended, or he encouraged that one should not read. And we mentioned in the previous classes why it is important that a person has a certain methodology and a criteria upon which, when he approaches the books, he doesn't read, or he doesn't approach any book without consulting either the scholars, or unless he has the capability to be able to read and to understand that. Because books are authored with specific intentions. And when the author authors a book, he has an end goal in mind. So certain books are not intended for beginners, and certain books are not intended for intermediary. Some books are known as advanced books, and some books have the capability to cater for both the beginners, the intermediary, and the more advanced student. And that is like the books of Imam al-Ghazali. Imam Ghazali's books, no one reads it, whether he's a beginner or he is an advanced level, except that he's able to benefit from the books of Imam Ghazali. And hence the reason why we see so much emphasis is placed on the books of Imam al-Ghazali. And this is a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is on the one hand. Second thing is, certain books are written solely for academic purposes, and it's not really intended for public consumption. And therefore, when a person writes a book and he intends through it that it is a research for academia, or it is intended for those who have a specific understanding or a certain level of appreciation. Certain jargons or certain terminology would be used, and it is almost accepted, or it is a given that the person who reads it will understand those things. So you wouldn't necessarily go into the details of certain discussions, because it is a given that the one who reads it already understands those things. And the likes of the books of Ibn al-Arabi. Ibn Arabi's books, Ibn Arabi's books, when he wrote his books, he wrote it with a specific intention that the one who reads it already has an appreciation for certain concepts and for certain terminologies, and he understands that when I'm writing my book, I'm not intending through it the apparent meaning, but I'm intending through it a meaning beyond what is just the apparent. And when this book is to be read, it is either to be read by a scholar or a student who will read it at the hands of, under the guidance or the supervision of a scholar. The problem is that when a person who doesn't understand the context of the writer. And remember, I'm the writer. I'm writing a book. When you read my text, you understand my text within its context. Look where I'm coming from. Look my environment. Understand my background. Imagine a person, by way of example, and this might sound might sound like a silly example. Objective behind to drive the point. I'm documenting a Maliki text in fiqh. Right? I'm documenting a Maliki text in fiqh. I complete with my fiqh, or my book in Maliki fiqh, and my book is now presented, and it is being read by a person who is a Shafi'i. Now the Shafi'i or the Hanafi, whatever madhab is, he says, "Hey, this person, see what he's saying? This is wrong. Does he not know that the Shafi'is are saying so and so and so and so?" But the book is not a Shafi'i book. It is a Maliki book. So understand, when you read it, you need to read it from the Maliki's perspective. If I quote my adillah, my evidence, even though certain does not, the Imam Shafi'i maybe disagrees with it, or Imam Abu Hanifa disagrees with it, that is their madhab. This is, for all intents and purposes, this is my madhab. These are the evidence that, in terms of my view, is the preferred evidence, and that is the more authentic evidence, and that's how it's to be understood. And if when you read my book, have appreciation for my manhaj, the Maliki madhab. Now, similarly, when Shaykh Ibn Arabi wrote his books, those who are reading his books and criticizing his works are not understanding the context within which he wrote his books, and they're not understanding the background which led him to writing and documenting and authoring these books. Similarly to Imam al-Ghazali, within certain periods within his life, he wrote certain works, and those works were intended for a specific situation that was peculiar within his time, and it served his purpose. Now the person comes 900 years later and he says, "Look what he says here, look what he says." That was, understand the context. Why I'm mentioning this as an introduction, is, and I'll get to the point, when the scholars in the books, when they discuss al-bid'ah, for example, many of the scholars, when they discuss bid'ah, and they discuss the mubtadi'un, or al-mubtadi'ah, and you look at the time when they authored their books, it will come to make you understand who they were referring to when they were speaking about the mubtadi'ah. Because in this time that we're living in, you find that they saying هؤلاء من مبتدعة الزمان and so on. And then they say, you see, they say that this is these people are mubtadi'ah and this and so on and so on and so on. This is a hadith and this is the proof that this is bid'ah, etc., etc., etc. But they don't understand the reference that is made by the author of the book. Who is referring to when he speaks about mubtadi'ah? They were living in a time, for example, the Khawarij were on the uprise, or were prevalent. They had, for example, firaq, the likes of the Mu'tazila, who were very rationalists. You had the firqas like the Batiniyah, the esoterics, who would subject anything in terms of interpretation of the Quran. They say that the Quran has an inner meaning as well. As much as there has an external linguistic meaning, it has an internal meaning. وَهَذَا هُوَ This internal meaning is the one that is intended by Allah. Because they say the external meaning, anyone can understand. Believer and disbeliever can understand it. It's linguistics, anyone can understand it. But the meaning that is intended by Allah is the internal meaning. What is the guidelines for the internal meaning? You can look into it yourself and you can see which meanings prevails to you within the text. That's problematic. If anyone can open up the Quran and say this tabadar ilayya, that the ma'na al-batini, the hidden meaning within this text is so and so and so, then anyone can interpret the Quran the way he wants to. Where is the manhajiyya? Where is the basis? Right? So when we read a book, it has to be understood within the context of the writer himself. Very similar to a fatwa. Very similar to a fatwa. When a fatwa is given, yura'a halul al-mustafti, the condition of the person who's asking the fatwa. And therefore these online fatwa, that is someone posts and then you have a lajna, they just receive the fatwa, they don't know who wrote it, they just say so and so and so. That is a big problem. That's a big problem because why the condition of the person who's asking the fatwa is not taken into consideration. Starting off by what madhab he follows, or what madhab he ascribes. Which madhab he ascribes to. Then understanding the environment, the bi'ah that he comes from. In certain environments, certain things are acceptable. In other environments, it's not acceptable. So the urf plays a big role in it. That's according to Imam Shafi'i, al-'adatu muhakkamatun. The 'ada, the practice, the custom within a certain community has an impact on the fatwa itself. So it is not just that, because you might be thinking, why is the author of this book dedicated a chapter specifically to books you should be reading and books you should not be reading? What's the sense in that? That is nothing other than to make you appreciate the methodology. That in everything there's a manhaj that you need to approach. So you start by your beginners, and then you gradually grow in your reading to more detailed text. The problem obviously is if the person doesn't have a manhaj and a methodology, and he reads anything, then he's going to become more confused than anything else. And therefore he says that certain books, for example, is to be read only in the company of scholars. And this is what he refers to when he says Al-Imam al-Haddad says قراءة السنوسية وأم البراهين حرام. The reading of the Sanusiyya, Al-Imam al-Sanusi, and al-Barahin is the same author, Al-Imam al-Sanusi. Reading those works is haram. That's haram. This is in deen. This is in aqidah. How can it be haram? No, not haram مطلقا, يعني لا يفهم على إطلاقه, not completely haram. It is haram for a person who doesn't understand it. And it is haram for the person who is reading it all on his own without the guidance of a teacher. Why? Because doing so will lead to something that is greater in sin than the hurma of its reading. then the prohibition of his reading, which is his aqidah, will become za'ira. His aqidah may be compromised. If his aqidah is compromised, his belief is compromised, he deviates from the fold. He deviates from the path. So in order to protect him, listen, brother, don't read this book all by yourself. Read it in the company of a scholar. Or first, approach the beginner's text. Then you can approach the more advanced sources or the higher level text. And that is the meaning what Imam al-Haddad is saying. He says, إن السلف لا يميلون إلى التوغل في علوم التوحيد ولا في علوم الأدب الذي تجب الإنسان وتخرجه عن دائرة الاحتجاج. ومن زادت فصاحته زادت قباحته وليس أن يترك الإنسان لسانه عوجاء ولكن هو التوغل الجم. He says that the Salaf generally wouldn't incline too much to reading the deep masail of Tawheed. They wouldn't incline in reading the deep masail of Tawheed, nor the intricacies of literature, literature, adab, Arabic literature, because those things causes the person to move away from the middle path, and it might sway him away from that balance and that middle path. And the more eloquent the person becomes, the more audacious he becomes. Now he has the usage of terminologies. Now he wants to play around with words. He wants to play around with words. You're playing around with words. Do you have the manhaj? Mathalan, we have in Imam Shafi'i was brilliant in his lugha. His adab was of extremely high level. Extremely high level. That he memorized the poetry of Hudayl and others. And it is extremely difficult poetry. But he almost perfected the Arabic language. And therefore when he looked in Quran and he applied lugha to the Quran and the Sunnah, he was able to understand from it things that others might not have understood. He was able to understand from it things that others were unable to understand. But the understanding of linguistics was always within the context, within the frame of Sharia. But if the person approaches Arabic literature and he goes deep into it, but he doesn't have a foundation of Sharia, he goes off the path. Otherwise, you'd find the greatest scholars of the likes of Sibawayh and others. Why did they not become scholars of fiqh, for example? When they understood, they were brilliant in literature. Why didn't they become scholars of fiqh? Because you needed a certain malaka, certain acumen to be able to understand Sharia, to be able to interpret the Quran. Why didn't he say, I am the scholar of my time in lugha, and therefore, because the Quran is Arabic, I will interpret the Quran according to, and I will derive ahkam from it. Because they understood that beyond literature, there's a need to understand Sharia, to understand the foundational principles. Now, so he says, it doesn't mean that you now need to, you must be someone who has a crooked tongue, someone that don't know how to use the language properly. But he says, excessively delving into that, the science of Tawheed, Aqaid, creed and belief, Arabic literature, becomes problematic. So you should maintain a balance. And then he gives another example. He says, like, by way of example, Shaykh ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, his madhab within his time, many scholars within his time, they criticized him for his views that he had. And he had many masail, where he basically went against kharaq al-ijma'. He went against the ijma'. Now ijma' is consensus of the scholar. Consensus, meaning no one differed about it. Everyone was in agreement. And then he went against it. Now, there's a qa'idah that says that al-mukhalifu ba'd al-ijma'i la yu'taddu bihi. Someone who has a difference after consensus has been reached, there's no weight to his view. His view is not taken into consideration. There's consensus, everyone agreed. Scholars, within a certain period of time, they came and they agreed. Khalas, this is so. Now you come afterwards, and then you say, no, this is not so. It's ijma'. Ijma' is one of the masadir of Sharia. After Quran and Sunnah, consensus of the scholars. ما رآه المسلمون حسن فهو عند الله حسن لا تجتمع أمتي على ضلالة. That my ummah will not reach consensus upon ضلالة. Who's the ummah here? The scholars within a certain period of time. The scholars within a certain علماء في عصر من العصور. Within a certain, does it have to be for the entire period from the time of the Sahaba until the day of Qiyamah? لا. The ulama within a certain period of time they came and they ajma'u. Everyone agreed. When Imam Shafi'i said so, or when Imam Abu Hanifa or Imam Malik said so, Imam Shafi'i came, he never objected to it, he never differed. Imam Malik never differed with it. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal never differed with it. Everyone agreed. Ijma', khalas. So consensus has been reached. So he has masail that he defied ijma'. وَنُقِمَ عَلَيْهِ فِي ذَلِكَ. And he was criticized for that. وَحُبِسَ مِنْ أَجْلِهِ. And he was locked up. وَمَاتَ مَحْبُوسًا. And he died in that state, in prison, because he went against ijma'. So he was a scholar, and there's no doubt about that. And he was well read, and there's no doubt about that. Some say كان علمه أكبر من عقله. Some say that his knowledge was a bit wider than his intellect. But nevertheless, he had كان عليه ما عليه وله ما له. He had good, and he had the issues also against many of his views. The issue that they had was that he went against ijma'. Now people, they just read his books, and they don't have prior reading in the works of the scholars, and they only read his books. Now they become, oh, subhanAllah, but they don't realize that what they're actually reading is against all the other madhahib and all the other scholars. So he has views, and the author, he had footnotes here, and he says that his masail is more than 60, approximately 60 masail that he went against ijma', against the consensus of the ummah. Alright? And if it was only in the furu', it was okay. But some of the masail was in the usul as well. It was only in the furu', which is the كيف تقول فروع? In the subcategories of the deen, and it's not the foundations of the deen, but the branches of the deen. But he had differences, or he differed, or he went against ijma' in some of the principles of the deen, some of the foundational principles of the deen, some matters of aqeedah. And that because he went against some matters of aqeedah where there was ijma' upon, and going against it, the result of that is that majority of the ummah then on that, based on his view, would be out of the fold, would be committing a major sin. And then the author speaks here about, he says, وَمِنْ أَبْشَعْ مَسْأَلَتَيْ ابْنِ تَيْمِيَّةِ فِي الطَّلَاقِ وَالزِّيَارَةِ. وَمَا أَبْشَعْ مَسْأَلَتَيْ ابْنِ تَيْمِيَّةِ فِي الطَّلَاقِ وَالزِّيَارَةِ. Ibn Taymiyyah had two masail that was amongst the most prominent of the masail that the scholars differed with him, and it was that of the talaq and ziyarah. Talaq referring to talaq al-thalath, where he said that if a person gives 3 talaqs in one sitting, then it falls only as one. No one said that. طلاق الثلاث في المجلس الواحد is 3 talaqs. If the person sits and he says طلقتك ثلاثا, I talaq you thrice, 3. It's 3 خلاص. Right? I give you 3 talaqs. Or I divorced you thrice. If I was to translate it now, I divorced you thrice. It's 3 talaqs. He said 1. All the أئمة, they said 3. He said 1. خالف الإجماع, خرق الإجماع. He went against إجماع. And the mas'ala of ziyarah, which refers to the ziyarah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Visiting the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that is where he says that when visiting Medina, you should not intend to visit the qabr of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but you should intend to visit the masjid. And if you visit the qabr, if you go especially with the intention to visit the qabr of Rasulullah, then it's safar ma'siyah. Then it's a journey of disobedience. Because the Prophet said, لا تشد الرحال إلا إلى 3 مساجد. No journey should be undertaken. I'm translating the hadith literally. No journey should be undertaken except to 3 masajid. Masjid al-Haram, Masjid al-Aqsa, or Masjid hadha, Masjid al-Nabawi. So he says the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said 3 masajid. So you can't say, I'm going to go visit Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm going to visit the qabr of Rasul. I'm going to his masjid. And if you don't say so, and you say, I'm going to visit his qabr, haram, ma'asiyah. Khalaf al-ijma'. He went against ijma'. He went against ijma'. He went against everyone. Not a single scholar said that you can't go visit the qabr of Rasulullah. But he went against it. And on account of that, the people who did so, there was something wrong with the aqidah, and there's something wrong with the belief, and they were innovators, and innovators is dalala, misguidance, and dalala is in the fire of Jahannam. So you see how it escalated. No, it was a mas'ala far'iyya. ما حكم زيارة قبر الرسول? But then it escalated, it became a mas'ala min al-usul, from the principal foundation, because now the person's iman is at stake if he goes and he visits Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. خرق الإجماع. He went against the consensus. لا تشد الرحال. Shaykh Yusuf explained it beautifully to me a few weeks ago. He explained the hadith of لا تشد الرحال, that the journey shows. What's the meaning of this hadith? The hadith is لا تشد الرحال للصلاة, just for performing, for the purpose of performing salah in it, مع زيادة الفضيلة, whilst expecting an added reward, except the 3 masajid. Because we know there's an added reward making salah in Masjid al-Haram, and Masjid al-Aqsa, and Masjid al-Nabawi. The hadith is wired in that. The benefits of making salah in Masjid al-Haram, and Masjid al-Nabawi, and Masjid al-Aqsa surpasses the benefit of making salah in any other masajid. And hence, when you're traveling specifically to go make salah within a masjid, seeking greater reward, don't think because you're traveling now to the furthest end of the world, you're going to now get 1,000,000 rewards. No, the fadila is the fadila of the masjid. The only masajid that has fadila, that has virtue, making salah in it over and above a normal masjid, is the 3 masajid. But that is what the hadith is saying. That's all the hadith is saying. The hadith is not saying that you cannot go visit the qabr of Rasulullah. And that was ijma'. The scholars agreed upon it. He disagreed. Right? So, how we got to this point is the author said, do not read his books unless you're reading it. You have previous reading, or you're reading it under the guidance of a scholar. Right? And he says, وَمِنِ اطَّلَعَ عَلَى كُتُبِهِ, the person who reads his books, and he obviously refers to someone who has understanding. The one who reads his books, بَانَ لَهُ الْخَطَأُ وَالصَّوَابُ, he will clearly see where he went wrong and where he was right, where he erred and where he was right. And he had many other stuff that he obviously the jismiya, and Allah Ta'ala, there's a mass, and there's a weight, there's a body, and there's the coming, Allah comes up and he goes down, that he sits on his arush, and it is touching his arush, and many other stuff that he حاد به عن الطريق. He went off the path in terms of his understanding and his interpretation. وقد نبه الشيخ ابن حجر وغيره على شيء من ذلك وحذر الجهال من مطالعة كتبه. Have the scholars responded to him? Yes. The scholars responded to him in his time. They responded to him, and here's the reason why: because of the fitna that was created, he was locked up. So the scholars, we are not discounting him from his knowledge. We are just saying that the person who reads his works should read it under supervision. Right. And Imam Ibn Hajar, referring Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, on more than one occasion, he warned from reading the person who doesn't, the layman, from reading certain his books. الإمام عيدروس بن عمر الحبشي قال: إن سلفنا كانوا لا يحبون الاشتغال الكثير بالبحث في علم العقائد، ويقول إن كثرة التطلع على مسائل ذلك الفن يخشى منها إثارة الشكوك والاطلاع على المسائل والعقائد الزائغة، ومثل هذا البعد عنه أولى، ويكفي الإنسان من هذا العلم ما حوته عقيدة الغزالي رحمه الله ونحوها من العقائد المختصرة والجهة. انتهى. Al-Imam Idrus bin Umar al-Habshi, he said that the Salaf, meaning the pious predecessors, they never loved the person, or would not encourage the person to read much in the science of aqaid, because it goes very deep, and what suffices you is the basics. And I remember our teacher Sayyid al-Hayyumar once said that reading the detailed, intricate masail in Tawheed doesn't increase your iman. It was a very profound statement. I never understood it initially. Well, I still don't understand it. But what I do understand of it is that to increase your iman, it suffices you to know the basics of Aqidah and to implement it. The intricate masail of Qada and Qadar and existence and pre-eternality and those masail, those intricate masail and the different layers of earth and the huyuliyah, etc. Those things doesn't increase your iman. It does not increase your iman. Sufficient for every single person until the day of Qiyamah, for any challenge that he finds, is the basics of Aqidah. The basics of Aqidah. The basic works in Aqidah suffices to protect him from any challenges he finds that will still come, that is currently in existence, that is currently happening, that is yet to come. The basics of Aqidah suffices him. If he has it, أحكمه وأتقنه, he understands it well. When I say Aqidah, we mean belief or creed. So a basic text in belief suffices you to understand the challenges of the time that you are living in. When I was explaining to some of these students, we were reading in the book of Al-Habib Muhammad bin Salim, Durus al-Tawheed. It's a very basic text, very basic. And he says, I wrote this text for the As-Saff al-Thalith al-Ibtida'i, for children who is in their third year primary. And here we are adults, but we're reading this book. But I showed him how this book, the small book, starting from the beginning chapter, is able to tackle the challenges, the gender challenge that we have in society today. He starts when he says, أحكام الحكم العقلي ثلاثة. The rules or the categories of rational judgments or rulings are three types: necessary, wajib, mustahil, impossible, and jaiz, possible. If you understand what rational rulings are and what is the meaning of rationally necessary, wajib aqlan, or rationally inconceivable or impossible, mustahil aqlan, or rationally conceivable or jaiz aqlan, if you understand it properly, then this entire argument of this gender argument just falls flat. That is the first page within the book, within introductory book of Aqidah, authored for the 3rd year primary school. We don't need to go into detailed discussions of Tawheed. That is for the people who want to specialize in the fun. That's good for them. But for us, we don't need those details. For me as an ordinary person, I don't need it. If I understand this, the scholars used to say, even some of our Egyptian Mashaykh used to say, this Aqsam al-Imam al-Dardir in his Kharida, he says, أقسام حكم العقل لا محالة هي الوجوب ثم الاستحالة ثم الجواز ثالث الأقسام فافهم منحت لذة الأفهام. That, he says, يحل مشاكل العصر. Just that rational, the different categories of rational rulings, it solves the problems of your time. But understand it. No need to go into this and this high level text. Understand the basic text, and it will solve the problem. But sometimes the nafs, your nafs drives you that you want to read intricate text and discussions and so, and then say, I read this or I read that. And first understand the basics, وأحكمه, and understand it well. Be firm in your understanding, and then there's no issue to grow in your reading. Rather, it becomes recommended. The next chapter, the author discusses the signs of the ulama of the akhirah, of the ulama of the year after, and warning one from the ulama of the dunya. كم بقي من الوقت؟ طيب نكتفي بهذا. We will end here إن شاء الله. Are there any questions? No. نعم. So نعم. جزاكم الله خير. I might not have amplified it enough. So we were saying that the majority of the ulama, in fact, there's consensus amongst the scholars that talaq al-thalath is thalath. 3 is 3. 3 is 3. As you say 3, then say 3. Like I said, that's the basic. That's the common understanding. خالف الإجماع أو خرق الإجماع. Ibn Taymiyyah went against ijma', consensus in this matter, and said, "No, 3 is 1." Went against ijma', but 3 is 3. In fact, you don't. The strange thing, you don't even find within our books. They discuss whether 3 is 3 or 3 is 1 within our books, because it's a given. 3 is 3. Like here and there you'd find about the general discussion. You don't find our books of fiqh specifically a chapter dedicated is talaq. So now in the contemporary scholars they would discuss is the talaq of 3, is it 1 or 3? And they would say the Jumhuri 3 and Ibn Taymiyyah, that like so there's idea of the view that it is 1. But in our books of fiqh, the classical text, it's known that 3 is 3. That is never an issue. In the same way, you're not going to find is visiting the qabr of the Prophet ﷺ haram. It is never an issue to visit the qabr of Rasulullah ﷺ. It may be mentioned, so by the way, and ala wajh al-istihbab, it is recommended to visit the qabr of Rasulullah ﷺ. That is obviously a complete different discussion, and the experts are sitting here in that field. So I don't want to attempt to tread on grounds that I have no knowledge about. But the intention was to give examples of where he went against ijma'. You visit the qabr of Rasulullah. You visit the qabr of Rasulullah. Not the masjid. You visit the qabr of Rasulullah. And 3 is 3. Is it difference? Is it difference? No, this is different. When you said I talaq you, it's different when you say I talaq you thrice. No. Shaykh Yusuf is our Shaykh. Yeah, this is different. It's not the same. We're speaking about if the person says I talaq you thrice. That's clear. I talaq you, this kalam there. I'm going to leave it to our Mashaykh to explain that. But let me just before I give it to, let me just again amplify and explain that saying I talaq you thrice in one sitting, saying the person telling his wife, and given that the sigha, his formula that he used and everything was correct, it was clear, it was explicit. I talaq you, ik het vir jou getalaq 3 keer. Talaqtuki thalathan. Explicit. 3 is? Huh? 3 is? 3 is 3. So keep that as 3 is 3. So it is 3. Khalas. He went against the ijma and he said no, 3 is 1. How can 3 be 1? 3 is 3. So, as for talaq, that is there's some kalam in that masala. Give to our masala.
Basically the mas'ala, we don't need the mic. So basically the whole mas'ala is that there's a difference when you say al-talaq, and because if I say al-talaq, a person can intend to make ta'keed, like to emphasize, like almost like it's almost like he's saying, I talaqed you, I definitely talaqed you. He could have meant that as well. So it depends. So almost like I talaq you could have kinaya of thalatha, or it could have, it could mean 1. And so there where the person must be asked basically, do you mean 1 or do you mean 3? That was your intention. And then from the point of there's a slight problem also in our community that we have, and that is some people think that the talaq only falls if they say talaq 3 times, and that's a major big problem that especially our judges and our muftis are sitting today with. And now may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant our people, and that's why knowledge is very important, because some people think for a talaq to fall they must say 3. Some people think if they say I talaq you, then the talaq is not complete. They must say ik talaq you 3 keer. You understand? 2. And that's a big, to end the marriage basically 2. And they don't know, but that is, stages of talaq that you go through. And through your 3rd talaq, meaning you can't get back to her again. And inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant our may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's why, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us understanding, inshallah ta'ala. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen.
You were saying, Abdul Rahman was saying, sometimes he feels that at nikah he wants to speak about talaq, but it's like such an anticlimax to be speaking at nikah about talaq, but because the amount of cases that you deal with that just displays the ignorance with regards to the masail of talaq is just unbelievable. It's like people, when they go to nikah classes, hulle wil nie leer van nikah van talaq nie. But whilst talaq is an essential part, because Allah forbid, should it come to that point, then you know the ahkam. But they will not lekker goeders leer. And they don't want to learn when it comes to talaq. So then the consequence of that is, when they fall into issue and they say, ek talaq vir jou 3 keer, now they come and they say, is daar nie 'n way wat ek nou weer kan terugkom met my vrou nie? Yo, but we love each other. I say, but you gave 3 talaqs. I say, I know, I didn't know, and I made a mistake. Khalas. Die coolest die nie. Die masjid.
So, what we must understand, first thing is that Ibn Taymiyyah was a scholar. He was a great scholar, but unfortunately, he went, like Shaykh Muhammad mentioned, in many masail, he went against the ijma'. He went against the ijma'. So, those people, especially that when they quote Ibn Taymiyyah, it's not a problem, but why we rather tell people to stay away from that, because you don't know what he went against ijma', you don't know what his masail is against the ulama. So a simple answer for that is, why didn't you take from the scholars just before him, the great scholars before him? Take from scholars that took from the scholars before him. Understand? So and then the other thing of bin Baz and that, mashallah, they are shuyukh and so, but also, why don't we take from scholars before them? And scholars before them, they spoke about these things in detail and from a proper fiqh point of view. And they spoke it from a usuli point of view, from the madhab, meaning they stick to the manhaj and to the qawaid of the principles of the madhab, and they came to a conclusion. And although there are different madahib that had difference of opinions, and so sometimes then these scholars, with all due respect to these scholars, they would come and they would make khalt between the madahib. They would take, because they sometimes take the text direct from the text, and then you'll see sometimes, many times, in one mas'ala they say so, in another mas'ala they say something else, but if you actually compare it, then the principles actually contradict. The principles actually contradict. And in major masail, you would find, especially in aqidah masail, like Shaykh Muhammad mentioned, you would find they themselves, with all due respect to that, you mentioned now bin Baz, Ibn Uthaymeen and those people, they contradict them. One says so, the other one says something else. But if you're all taking from the Quran and Sunnah, which you can differ, but I mean, if you're all saying, no, we are the proper path or so, then you're at least supposed to have some manhajiyah. But you are differing in major things. If you said now you're differing in furu', like in maybe in more branch masail, then it would be different. But you differing in major things, and that shows that there is no principles that you are working on. Major principles and manhajiyah and qawa'id that you are building a certain understanding on. And these way it is, I would say, it's incumbent that you must take from a madhab.
Because a madhab came, and it was from the time of Imam Shafi'i, it was from the time of Imam Malik, from the time of Imam Abu Hanifa, from the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. It was sifted down and it was crystallized, it was purified, it was until ulama, generations after generations after generations, until it came to us pure. So, yes, today the first things that normally pop up on social media is the fatwas and so, which is not a problem, but we would advise a layman first know your madhab properly, because they with, like I'm saying, with our respect to them, they say themselves, we take from Quran and Sunnah. We're taking from Quran and Sunnah. And now and then they will quote a madhab. But normally they say they're taking from Quran and Sunnah. But you must know your madhab. You must know your principles that you're riding on and so. But now sometimes they quote Ibn Taymiyyah. But now how do you know that what they're quoting from Ibn Taymiyyah is coinciding with the ulama before? So that's why the Shaykh is actually saying, don't read the books of Ibn Taymiyyah unless you read it in front of a Shaykh, meaning the Shaykh will be able to tell you that is wrong there, that is go against the ulama. That is, and it's, what we find very strange today is, imagine 90% of the ummah, or let we say 95% of the ummah, of the ulama of the ummah agreed on something, and then I'm pushing an agenda of 5% of the ummah. And doesn't the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam say that, alaykum bis sawadi al-a'zam, stick with the black masses, the majority of the black masses, and the lan tajtama ummati ala dalal, my ummah won't gather upon something that is wrong, and so, and these basically this understand. So basically that few words that the Shaykh is saying is very profound. It's not saying, in what he don't say don't read it at all. No, he was a scholar and so, but there are many masail that he went against the ijma', and that must be understood properly. And that's why I say that, because I don't know what is, if I read a book, I just reading, I'm not sure that is this mas'ala correct. This mas'ala of because Ibn Taymiyyah, he was so brilliant actually, that he would make his own, come to his own conclusions many times, which you deserve, but it need to be shown out, because even our ulama, if our ulama wins against the ijma', then they will say, but with all due respect and so, but in that mas'ala we went against the ijma'. If it is so, but the problem is, why didn't we say that about him also? Look here, with all due respect, Ibn Taymiyyah, you were a scholar of deen, but there are certain masail you were against ijma'. What is a problem is those masail that was against ijma', I want to make it like that are the main masail today. Like Shaykh Muhammad mentioned, go visiting the qabr of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was never a problem. Then Ibn Taymiyyah came up with it, and then suddenly everybody is afraid to. If he leaves from here, if he goes to Medina, he's afraid to intend, I'm going to visit the qabr of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he's been told to him it is shirk. How can you go for ibadah, for hajj, while you are having shirk in your heart? I mean, and it became very relevant. It became it became that is the belief. So it became, while that is going against the ijma'. And that is the problem. That is our problem. It's not that there is khilaf, there is a difference, is because they made it seems like the mas'ala that is the normalist mas'ala, the shad mas'ala, that mas'ala that is not supposed to be counted, it made to be seen like that mas'ala is the main, it is the understanding of the aqeedah of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which is not. And many people don't know that. So when they just read on the internet, the Bin Baz, Ibn Taymiyyah, with all due respect with their knowledge, but you must Why didn't you take of the ulama, all the ulama before then? Why don't you consider those ulama? And when we tell them, but it is not like that, and they say, but you're going against this and that. But they say, but all the other ulama before said that. Understand? And Allah, Shaykh Muhammad will probably be able to answer best.
That's very different. The two Eid mas'ala is very different in that the two Eid is a far'i mas'ala. It is sub mas'ala, sub category. It doesn't affect your aqidah. Tomorrow if I celebrate Eid with those who celebrating Eid with Makkah, doesn't make me a kafir. In no way, in whichever way you look at it. In its worst cases, you're wrong and the majority is right, but it doesn't make you in any way a kafir. What Shaykh Yusuf is saying is the strange thing is that how sub-category masail became foundational aspects upon which your creed is now determined. Understand that and understand it well. Something that was a fiqh mas'ala became a mas'ala of aqidah. So let's take the example of visiting the qabr. Visiting the qabr is a mas'ala of fiqh. It's a fiqh mas'ala. Touching the qabr, at-tamassuh bil qabr, wiping the qabr, is a mas'ala of fiqh. Is it jaiz, is it not jaiz? The scholars say, some say jaiz, some say it is makruh because you wouldn't wipe the person in his face while he's alive, so you don't do it after he passed on. That became a mas'ala of aqidah. Visiting the qubur, tabarruk is haram. The person who does it is a grave worshipper. And as innovator, grave worshipping is haram, and a person who does it is kafir. فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. Then they use the Quran. Right? So it's very different. When a matter is made a part of the foundational aspects of Sharia, the principles of Sharia, and when something it is on the peripherals, it is a subcategory. لا يكفر مرتكبه لا يكفر مرتكبه. The person does it is not out of the fold of Islam. But we obviously, our point is clear is that we are with the Sawad al-A'zam. As Shaykh Yusuf said, Sawad al-A'zam is basically the majority, the overwhelming majority. And the overwhelming majority and the correct view is that you celebrate the Eid with the sighting of the moon throughout the entire year, starting from Muharram all the way to the Hijjah. صوموا لرؤيته وأفطروا لرؤيته فإن غم عليكم فأكملوا عدة شعبان 30 يوما. That rule is مضطرد. It is throughout, it is consistent throughout the month. It is not only applicable for the month of Ramadan, and the rest of the months is not applicable. But the month of Ramadan, the month of Dhul Hijjah, in every other month, the moon gets sighted. When the moon is sighted, within our own region, we fast, we break fast, we celebrate. The month starts, the month ends, and that is how it is. As for those who are celebrating with Makkah, they saying that it is a lengthy discussion, but the long and the short of it is that they say that Hajj only takes place in Makkah, and therefore you should be following Makkah when it comes to the when it comes to the beginning of the month. And there's only one Arafah, and we agree with him. We say there's only one Hajj and there's only one Arafah, and Arafah is only for the Hajj, and Hajj is only for the Hajj, and therefore for them, those who are on Hajj, they should follow Makkah, and we're not on Hajj. Can I say I'm going to go for Arafah? I'm going to stay on Arafah here? No. Can I say that I'm going to put on my ihram here? No. So what do? I follow my local sighting because I'm not on Hajj. As for the person who is on Hajj, the sighting of the moon of Makkah becomes applicable to him. Nothing else. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.